Hey friends, it's Mr. Jim and welcome back to Kid Short Stories. If this is your first time, welcome to the family. We are the podcast that turns your ideas into an amazing adventure every single day. You know, we couldn't even exist without imaginations from kids just like you. So if you have an idea for a story, I'd love to see it. Check down in the show notes below for how you can submit your own story idea, and maybe we'll turn it into an awesome adventure. And parents, if you're new to kids podcasting, I want to challenge you to listen to podcasting for 5 days in a row with your kids. It's going to increase their imagination, decrease screen time, and we're going to have a lot of fun along the way. Are you guys ready for today's adventure? Me too, let's go! It was the night before St. Patrick's Day, and Mason and Mabel were putting the finishing touches on their leprechaun trap. Don't forget to put the gold coins under the box, Mason reminded Mabel. That's what the leprechauns will be after. Mabel nodded as she painted the last color of the rainbow. Then she placed the chocolate gold coins and admired their work. There's no way any leprechaun is going to be able to resist this. The trap was brilliant. It looked like a large rainbow over a field of shamrocks. There was a box disguised as a cloud, with the gold coins placed underneath it. When the leprechaun grabs the coins, the box will fall, and then we will have them. Mason and Mabel left the trap on the front porch, so the leprechauns wouldn't sprinkle glitter all over their house. They were known to be messy and mischievous, but if you could catch one, they'd offer you a wish before disappearing. The two kids ran back inside and watched the trap through the living room window, whispering about what they would wish for. I want a mac and cheese fountain, whispered Mason. Definitely a unicorn, Mabel whispered back. The view outside was dark, aside from the porch light illuminating the leprechaun trap. It remained that way for a while, as Mason and Mabel grew sleepier and sleepier. Then a green light began glowing out in the grass. It moved across the yard, slowly making its way toward the trap. Mason bolted upright and grasped, tapping his sister. Mabel! Mabel! Do you see that? Yes! She squeaked, trying to stay quiet. Do you think it's a leprechaun? But Mason didn't have time to answer. Just then, flames flashed across the ground, chasing after the glowing light. Without saying a word, Mason and Mabel both ran out the door to see what was happening. The flames shot out again, and they saw they were coming from something crawling on the ground. Squinting into the dark, Mabel announced, That's an iguana! A fire-breathing iguana! The iguana heard her approaching and turned toward them. Oh, hi there. Don't be alarmed. My name's Lizzie, and yes, I'm a fire-breathing iguana, but I'm also a detective. I've been tracking these glowing green lights underground for quite some time. Cool! Can we help? Asked Mabel. We think it's a leprechaun, added Mason. Oh, a leprechaun. Oh dear. Well, I better keep a close eye on this. They are known to be quite the tricksters. I suppose I will need all the help I can get. Come along now. Lizzie sighed, smoke spiraling out of her mouth. She quickly waddled her short iguana legs away, chasing the underground glow. Mason and Mabel grinned at each other with excitement and followed after her, scanning the yard. A green light zipped underneath the dirt up ahead. Over there! Mason called. The three of them began chasing after the light. It zipped under the sandbox, then the swing set. Then, turning sharply, it started moving in circles underneath the garden. Lizzie began breathing fire and tried to follow it. "No, not Mom's broccoli," Mabel shouted. Lizzie stopped breathing fire at once, but not before a couple broccoli heads were fire roasted. "Whoops. Sorry, I told you they were tricksters," Lizzie apologized. The glowing green light then took off into the trees behind the yard. "Follow that light," the iguana yelled. Mason, Mabel, and Lizzie ran into the woods, following the green light underneath their feet as it looped and swooped in circles. They had to be careful because if they followed too closely, the light would disappear under trees. More than once, they had to stop themselves from running into tree trunks. Once the light realized they were onto its tricks, it headed back toward Mason and Mabel's house, making sure to dart under every puddle on the way. Despite her little legs, Lizzie the fire-breathing iguana was the first to enter their yard. "Oh no! Look!" she cried. There was no longer just one green light darting about. Now there were dozens. Lights of all different shades of green darted around underneath the grass, lighting up the ground. "What do we do?" asked Mason. "We can't catch them all." Mabel agreed. "But I hope we do. Think of all the wishes." Lizzie exhaled a mouth of flames. "Your leprechaun trap is much too small to catch them all. But I have an idea." A few minutes later, Mason and Mabel had collected the supplies. They put their craft skills to the test, creating a giant box to look like the biggest shamrock any of them had ever seen. They hung it from a rope on the porch and scattered the chocolate gold coins in a path leading up to it. Lizzie gave them a toothy lizard grin and said, "Okay, let's hide." Lizzie, Mason, and Mabel ducked behind the porch bench and flower pots, waiting. One by one, the glowing lights seemed to notice the chocolate gold coins above ground. They began moving towards them, and every once in a while, a small hand would pop right out of the grass to swipe a coin. As they took more coins, leprechauns moved closer and closer to the porch. Being chocolate and gold lovers, they couldn't resist, and leprechauns began popping out of the ground and hopping up the porch steps, making their way right over to the huge pile of coins under the shamrock. Mason, Mabel, and Lizzie waited until all the leprechauns had gathered and were stuffing coins into what seemed to be their bottomless pockets. "Now!" Mabel shouted, and Lizzie shot flames at the rope holding up the shamrock. The rope burnt to a crisp and snapped, landing with a loud boom on the porch. All of the leprechauns were trapped underneath it. "Yes! Wish time!" Mabel and Mason high-fived. The next morning, Mason and Mabel's parents entered the kitchen, greeted by stacks of every flavor pancake imaginable and a mac and cheese fountain on the counter. In the living room, Mason and Mabel were finishing their breakfast in a fort made of books, while a pink unicorn and fire-breathing iguana napped on the rug. Can you imagine what their parents were thinking? Wow, if you caught a leprechaun, what would you wish for? Wow, friends, well, that may be the end of our story, but it's only just the beginning of their amazing adventures that lie ahead. The end. Great job, you listened all the way to the end, and you know what time it is. It's time for Kid Shout Out. Sound to Hayden, Nathan from California, Lily from England, Rue and Yakov from Chicago, Langston from Florida, Henry and Gretel from Illinois, and Ever from Florida. I'm so glad that you're all on the Kid Short Stories family. We could not have this much fun with imagination without you, my friends. Well, you have a super duper day, and I'll see you on our next adventure. Bye!